Hi, everyone, and welcome to the GlobeDocs screening and conversation around City So Real. My name is Lauren King, and I write about film for the Boston Globe, and it's my great pleasure to be here with the film's director, Steve James, and producer, Zach Piper. Zach, I know you did other things besides produce. You did the sound too, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And Steve did other things besides direct too. He
Yeah, like being in the shots with the camera.
That's right.
On many occasions. So let's get right into it. There's so much to talk about in this incredibly rich film. My first question is you've made films where Chicago is a front and center, the great Hoop Dreams, of course, and The Interrupters, and the docuseries America and Me, and probably others. This one is a portrait of the city. Why did you want to take that open up that broad lens? Did you know going in that was your intention? Just talk a little bit about how you approached this big undertaking.
Yes. Well, for years I've wanted to do a film, not a docuseries, but a film that was a portrait of the city. And Zach and I would talk about it from time to time on our various projects. And but the key was to try to figure out the ideal time to do it, because I wanted it to happen at a point where Chicago finds itself at a significant moment or crossroads. And when Obama was running for president the first time, that was the first time, not that I had the idea, but I thought, oh, maybe now's the time to do that. But I'm glad we didn't do it then, because he was barely in Illinois, because he had Illinois. But when this mayoral election rolled around and promised to be the most wide open one in history, even before Rahm Emanuel drops out, that and the fact that it would coincide with this very important trial here of the white police officer, Jason Van Dyke, for the murder of Laquan McDonald, it just seemed like this is that moment. And so we went out with the idea of making a film, not a docuseries, but we always had in our minds that it was going to, even though those important stories would be, the spine of it, if you will, that it would be a portrait of the city itself. And that's how it went from a film to a docuseries, because it just became clear that the only way we could do justice to kind of all of it, if we even do justice to all of it now, was a docuseries.
Did that realization happen organically during the shooting process because you were uncovering so much texture or was there a pivotal moment where you
talked about it, didn't we, Zach?
Kind of like did. From time to time. Like when we were out the 12th day in a row filming, Yeah, it definitely.
At the Board of Elections.
Yeah, right. It came up, but I think it wasn't until, all the scenes were cut and it was something like a 12-hour assembly that Steve and David Simpson, the other editor on the project, put together, that it really became a serious conversation about, is this a film or can this support a series?
With the mayoral election, which is fascinating and gives the film, it's such an important element. At what point, did you follow all these candidates just waiting to see who'd break through? And when did it dawn on you that Lightfoot was not just an also-ran?
Well, the funny thing is that from the start, we were interested in Lori Lightfoot when she was not, anywhere near considered a front runner, but she was fascinating to us, and we reached out to her. I think she was absolutely the first candidate that we reached out to about this film, and she was personally receptive, but her press people didn't see the virtue of her doing this because it wasn't going to help her get elected. And that was the general feeling we got from frontrunners mostly. Yeah. Was, they would see us and immediately be interested in us because we had a big camera, and they thought, oh, is this the news or what is it? And then when they found out we were making a documentary, it was like, no, thank you. Because I think we felt a lot of those frontrunners thought they might eventually be mayor, and they didn't want to have any embarrassing content out there. So it tended to be the more minor characters or candidates who were interested in being in this. And that was fine with us because frankly, we were more interested in them as candidates. We thought they were really interesting people. And Zach and I talked about this. We never wanted to feel like we had to be following the winner.
Yeah.
That this was not that kind of political film. This was about the whole process, not just, are we inside the winning candidate, campaign. But with Lori, we kept pushing and pressing and finally figured out how to circumvent her press people and go directly to her, which was great. And then she let us in, and that tended to coincide with her starting her climb up. And that's why I think in the series, you sort of see her kind of, she's not really that present in the first couple hours, and then she has a lot of presence. And that, again, that wasn't by design. We would have loved to have been there the whole time, but it worked out.
Well, it seems the endorsement, the Sun-Times endorsement really
Absolutely
catapulted her a bit, and there you are. And that's the great thing about an on-the-ground doc like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that, she was polling around 2.8% 3 or 4 weeks before the election, which I think was also just, with so many candidates in the field, I think it was maybe, overwhelming for folks to try to follow when people weren't really paying attention as closely at that point. So it kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
That scene that you're talking about is a perfect example of how we circumvented the press people. Zach saw on social media or in the daily press book or whatever, that she was going to vote in person that day, early voting. And so we just showed up and we just walked right past the press person and said, Lori, do you mind if we film you voting today? And she was like, sure.
Sure. Yeah.
And then that's how we were able to do that a lot with her. She personally liked what we were doing and liked the whole concept of this being a broader look at the city of Chicago, not just an election film.
With that broad look, and this is for both of you, these chance encounters, I want to talk a little bit about that style of filmmaking and how you embraced that, because that's obviously what gives the film so much power. These chance encounters, conversations, then you return to different people and we follow them. That's a very, I imagine, a very stressful way to film, but ultimately extremely rewarding. It certainly is for the viewer. So I just want to talk a little bit about that kind of filmmaking. What you just, Steve, you could start, both of you. Go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say, I think, it took a little bit of time to get into the groove of this kind of filmmaking because, obviously verite filmmaking is something Steve's done for, decades now, and myself for, I'm getting up there. But this was different. I mean, it had elements that were, we're following things and things were unfolding and we're filming, but the serendipitous nature of the process was what took a minute to kind of, and by a minute, I mean several months, really. I mean, we were still doing it, but it really took that extra effort on our part and being really intentional about making sure we had an open mind and making sure that, when someone hails us over and says, hey, camera guys, I got something to say. Where in the past, where sometimes we'd politely maybe decline or find a way out of it, or this time we went over there really interested and really filming and really, seeing where it led.
Yeah, and I tell you, once we found our groove with it, first of all, it was part of the original idea, and it was inspired by a Chris Marker film called Le Jolie Mai, which was made in the mid '60s, Portrait of Paris, which I saw many, many, many years ago. And he takes that approach, this sort of serendipitous approach, lets one thing lead him to another because, he's a poet. So that's what poets do, I guess. And, but so it was part of our original concept, but like Zach was saying, we kind of struggled at first with it because even though we're very open filmmakers and organic filmmakers, this was a different level of openness. And so, but once we found our groove, I tell you, man, it's the most fun I've had filming, I think, on any film, which is saying a lot because I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so has Zach.
It's gonna be hard to go back.
Yeah, hard to go back to a more structured approach because it was so liberating.
Well, for example, I'm thinking of that encounter with the Uber driver who's in the Care Bears outfit, which it just seems like a portrait of a Chicago resident, and isn't this interesting? And then it opens into something quite unexpected and powerful. And then that she comes back in episode 5, which I'll talk to you about later. How did that come about? Just a random encounter?
We were on our, I think we were done with our shooting for the day, right? And we were on our way back to our cars because we would often use Lyft or Uber to get us around because it was a lot more efficient than getting back in our car. So we were on our way back to our cars. She just happened to be our driver. She saw the camera and sound gear, and she was curious about what we were doing. She was very bubbly. And so then when we told her what we were doing, she started talking about how much she loved Amara Enya, one of the candidates. And I just said, hold on, do you mind if I get in the front seat and like, we could film you? And she was like, oh, okay. And so then she starts that scene, and the way it started in shooting was talking about Amara. And then I happened to ask her about her Care Bears outfit. And somehow that leads us, that opened a door. She's funny at first, and it opened a door to her telling this very powerful story about what had happened to her earlier that day. And I think one of the things that speaks to, and we encountered it time and time again, but that's a really great example of it, I think, is that people want to be heard. And this was the kind of project where that's what we were there for, is we were there to encourage people to speak to us candidly and however personally they wanted to get about what they care about, what bothers them, what they believe, what drives them. And she just did it. And as a result of that scene, we stayed in touch with her. And then she texted me. I mean, we were looking to find a way to get back to her in episode 5, but she texted me one weekend and she said, I just had this thing happen. She sent this really emotional text that I just had this thing happen. And that's what we were like, well, we have to see you, tomorrow. Let's just go and have you tell us about it. And she was like, yes.
Wow. Well, let's talk a little bit about episode 5, because obviously the film was supposed to end with 4 and with Lori Lightfoot's impressive victory. And then something happens. And tell us a little bit about how you decided to go back and what surprised you, how did that unfold? That I mean, episode 5 is right up to the minute. I mean, it's right up till this moment we're in.
Yeah, I think when the pandemic hit, Steve texted me or called me or something. We were talking quite a bit, and he said, I think we should follow up with some of the folks that we've been filming with over Zoom. And so over the course of the next several weeks, that's what we were doing. And Steve was recording these Zoom conversations, follow-ups with folks from episodes 1 through 4. And then George Floyd hit. And when George Floyd hit, we had been, at this for over a month. And it just became clear that, we have to keep filming and we have to expand, production and really, and cover this as best we can. And at that time we didn't have a broadcast partner as well. So we didn't really know when, where this was going to lead us or where in terms of the series, or we didn't have deadlines or anything. We just were filming. And I think, thankfully we did, because it really is, episode 5 really is like a crystallization of all the issues and challenges being grappled with in the first 4 episodes.
Steve, you must be fairly well known in Chicago. Maybe you're not. I think because of your past
he's well known
and all the success you had. I mean, so is that that may open doors, or is that a little bit of a problem when people get excited to see you on the street? Does it kind of blow your cover a little bit?
I'm not that well known.
Okay.
People don't get excited to see me on the street.
I'm speaking to a documentary audience, and we all know who you are.
I think for the most part, it's a help without question, because, that people, and institutions that we're approaching, they know that this stands a good chance of, it's for real, and that it stands a good chance of getting out there in a meaningful way. The only place I've ever had real problems, and even though it didn't work against it didn't work against me on America to me, but the place I've had the biggest problems have been schools, because, and it goes back to Hoop Dreams. People watched Hoop Dreams and they felt like the portrait of the schools, particularly the St. Joe's Catholic School, was, negative, and they don't want to, as my mom would say, they didn't want to borrow trouble by letting us in. Now, that didn't happen with America to me, because it was a school where I live and my kids had gone to it. And so the level of trust there was much greater because of my connection to it. But for the most part, it's been very helpful, and it has opened doors, and it gives us a kind of credibility at times, that's useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the neighborhoods across this city that we fortunately are guided on where they are, and that Chicago is obviously a lot more than South Side, North Side. As a Chicago resident, both of you, were you very familiar with them, or were some of these smaller neighborhoods all over the place a mystery to you too? Or did you discover things going in? Did you already know a little bit about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think work has taken us around the city, at least taken me around the city. And I know the same is probably true for Steve, quite a bit, and quite a bit more than just the regular folk who might live in a neighborhood. I'd say for me, the place where I haven't been as much is the East Side, in Sue Sodlowski Garza's ward, who, she's depicted in episode 5. The area that has 9 landfills, and it's sort of like where all the industry is being pushed, and which actually
you can shoot shit.
What's that?
And you can shoot shit.
And you can shoot shit, yeah, like duck and duck. But that actually borders Indiana. I can't remember if that's in the series or not, but I mean, people literally live across the street from Indiana. So that was a place for me where I haven't, and I, spent a great deal of time. So I was learning quite a bit on the East Side.
And Zach really knows the city really well. He's a real student of the city in so many ways. So is my son, Jackson, who is one of the DPs. He's for as young as he is, he knows quite a bit about the city and has been in many of its neighborhoods. And I've been in a lot of neighborhoods too, but this project really took me places that so many places I hadn't really been. And that's the beauty of doing documentary is that you get to go places, but not in that touristy way. You know what I mean? You get to go places and experience them in a different way, which is more meaningful.
I just want to mention to the viewers that all 5 parts, if they haven't seen all 5, are still available. They can watch up until the end of tonight, and of course, after that, I think it's out there. It's streaming. It's on.
Yes, on Hulu.
Hulu. Yeah. What I love about a great documentary is that it takes you deeper into wanting to learn more and examine more. And thank you for yours, because it introduced me to Nelson Algren. I looked up where that title might have come from, and I found this amazing writer from Chicago.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you settled on the title City So Real, and why it's connected to this amazing writer that I just looked up the other day and was mesmerized by his work?
Yeah, he is remarkable. Well, one of our executive producers on the film is Alex Kotlowitz, who's a terrific writer and was a partner of mine and Zach's on the film The Interrupters. And Alex wrote a book some years ago, a kind of guide, a really great kind of guide, off-kilter guidebook to Chicago, which is, if anybody's interested, you should read it, called Never a City So Real, where he took and kind of paraphrased Algren, because the Algren quote it doesn't say city. So he's talking about the city, but it's not, he's using the metaphor of a lovely woman with a broken nose to get there. And so Alex, made that his title, Never a City So Real. And Alex was great executive producer to have on the project because he knows Chicago a lot too and had some really great ideas. And at a certain point when we were in editing, I just kind of was like, I love that title, but we can't call it Never a City So Real. That would be too baldly imitating. So we just went with City So Real, and I reached out to Alex and said, "You cool with this, right? If we just take City So Real?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm cool with it." So, and then of course, Tim Tutton, the owner of the Hideout Bar, not prompted by us, he says it. He says Never a City, he's a City So Real. So a lot of times people watching the series might assume that the title came from Tim, which, we probably should have claimed it did, but we had to give a shout out. We had to give a shout out to Alex.
Where
we did.
deserved.
Speaking of all those chance encounters that end up just being so powerful, I mean, when you went to the two barber shops, which end up being a recurring motif, it's amazing the differences between the two. And I just wanted to talk a little bit to you about how you found that to be being there and shooting it. Did you know immediately, oh my God, this sets up a real, just what were you thinking as you discovered these guys?
Yeah, well, with the first one, the Black Barber Shop in South Shore, our impetus to go in there was to film with people who knew Harith Augustus, who was a barber, and it's featured in the first episode, who was killed in an altercation with by the police. And it created quite a stir for a while. And so our impetus to go to the barbershop was to go find out who Harith Augustus was, from people that knew him and worked with him. But when we went in there, when we were filming, it started out to be that, but then this postal worker wandered in who had never been to that barbershop, and that became the scene. And, for us, quite a powerful scene. And that, that's what inspired us to go find the Bridgeport white barbershop.
Okay.
And that's an example of letting the story lead us to where it wanted to lead us. We were like, okay, we got the black barbershop, and black barbershops in American culture are kind of iconic places, right? But it's like, what do white guys talk about in barbershops? It was kind of like our curiosity. And when we went to that barbershop, we had no idea that it was mostly ex-cops that frequented it. We had no idea. That revealed itself in the way it does in the series. It revealed itself to us in the same way.
Did it surprise you the other powerful scene? I mean, among many, I'm just thinking, when you went to a white park or a neighborhood, and so few even knew about Laquan McDonald, knew about the case, when this seemed to be a consuming bit of news in Chicago. I think as viewers, we were surprised by that, or I was. How did you feel when you were getting that information? Did that surprise you, shock you, or depress you?
Yeah, it depressed me. I mean, I felt a little surprised, I have to say. It just spoke to the bubble that I was in. We were in, consuming everything that was happening in Chicago, and really, thinking about it a lot. And in fact, we had actually filmed, just similar to the barbershop, comparison. We had filmed at Desi's hair salon. That's we went there on a Friday night during the trial. It was amazing to see how thoughtful every single person that we spoke to was about this. I mean, we were there for, I think, almost a few hours. And we talked to many, many people. We only included a few in the scene, but it was, Steve was saying, we need to find a place where we can go. We didn't want to do it like another hair salon, because we've already kind of did that, but we need to go to a place where we can encounter, mostly white folks to see, just to run a test, see what people have to say about it. And so we picked this park, and you know, the results, or you know, what we captured speaks for itself. Almost the polar opposite in terms of engagement and just awareness.
Yeah, and I have to say, it surprised me. I'm always amazed at how naive I can be, even after all these years. Like I mean, not that I expected the same level of engagement, you know, I didn't, but the sort of utter lack of engagement
And just
surprised
lack of knowledge about even what it was, sort of,
Yeah.
which is astounding. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was all over the papers, all over the media, all over everywhere.
And the excuse that, well, you don't really know what the news, I don't really follow news, that spoke to the present moment we're in. And that really upset me, because it was like, if it something didn't affect them personally or really was an important, it just, the willful ignorance.
Yeah, it was, you know, there were plenty of white people in the city, and there's one guy in the park that's more attuned.
That's true.
But there were plenty of white people in the city who were, you know, cared deeply about this without question. But it is amazing the level of engagement in the Black community around this. We didn't encounter a single person in the Black community who hadn't thought kind of deeply about this, right? And had strong opinions about it.
So by episode 5, when the divide is so that we see throughout the whole series, but is so obvious by 5, do you have hope for healing, or does the divide seem insurmountable at this point? Does it? What are your feelings after having been there through the marches and through the aftermath of George Floyd, COVID? We see Lori Lightfoot now is, you know, being criticized too. What did you feel about that, being there shooting in that episode?
I think there's glimmers of hope, certainly even in episode 5, seeing the work that Neil Salas-Griffin, one of the mayoral candidates, you know, same with Amara Enya, and even the young activist Miracle Boyd, and knowing that she kind of represents a lot of young people who are very, very engaged in politics and very invested in the future of the city. And to me, that's, you know, with all of the chaos, uncertainty, all the things swirling around in 2020, to see people have a real clarity of, you know, of purpose on the work that they need to do and are doing, I find that very hopeful. Yeah,
I agree with that, and I hope I'm not naive about that. But I mean, there's just a spirit here in the city. There's always been a spirit here. I think that will ultimately prevail, but it ain't going to be easy, and we'd have a much better sense of where we're headed probably, well, if we're lucky, in a couple of days. But I think that, you know, Lori as mayor, she's never held elective office, and she put herself in one of the toughest jobs in America. I'm convinced. A big city mayor, especially in this city, is about as hard as it gets. And, you know, she's determined. She's got, I think, things to learn, and she will tell you that, and so will her detractors. But, you know, I think that there's a collective will here that we're going to get through it.
Well, you do end on a really hopeful note with those young girls singing. That's pretty obvious. It was, and so that brings me to the music. I know you couldn't have a long film about Chicago without great music, but here, I mean, there's everything from gospel to old R&B to rap. Yeah, I just want to hear a little bit about what your vision was and how you knew you wanted to underscore all this action with this great soundtrack.
You know, I was just going to say, a series about Chicago you know, it deserved to have a score, a soundtrack that was, you know, Chicago centric. And I think with only two exceptions, every cue that we put in the cut is from, in the series, is from Chicago, recorded in Chicago. I think the earliest recording is 1961, although now that I say that, I think that the gospel, the Staple Singers recording that you just were mentioning, I think that's actually older. I need to check on that. But we also included songs that were recorded this year in 2020, which was an important thing that, you know, especially Steve really wanted, but that Dawn Sutter-Medell, who is the music supervisor, was fantastic in going out and finding, you know, the newest releases to see what could possibly work in the cut. But Chicago has such a rich history. It was just a perfect fit to try to showcase a little bit of that.
Yeah, you know, most of the films that I've done and that Zach and I've done, you know, we hire a composer. We'll frequently have licensed music, you know, in the film, but not like this. Usually a composer does the heavy lifting. And we really did set out with the goal of not having any composed music in the film. Now, we didn't quite get there, but really the composed music in the film, with one exception, there's basically three composed pieces in the film. Two of them are just riffs on an existing piece of music that we had the group just expand on. And one is an original composition. And that's not bad for 5.5 hours, especially with a series that has this much music in it. But it was such a blast. It was a blast to work with it as an editor. And Zach is like a dictionary of old gospel, soul music. So some of those older pieces that find their way into the series were his ideas.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That was amazing. And some of the spontaneous, I mean, you see that music is just an integral part of life. When that homeless woman starts singing in the diner.
Yeah.
The girls at the end. I mean, just that came across, that music is just part of this city's life.
Yeah. That's a great point. And one of my favorite little moments is when, you know, I was on my way to a shoot, and I got off the expressway, and there were these guys playing music, you know, Chicago Soundbox is their name, and, you know, along the side of the expressway, you know, collecting tips from drivers. And so I just stopped because I was unusually early for me for a change, and I just said, "Hey, can I film you guys? We're doing this film," and they were like, "Sure." So, you know, those are the kind of things we would just trip across that you're just like, oh, love that.
Yeah. Well, we've got a few questions from our viewers, so I'm just going to throw out some comments here. We've got Nina. How do you view the rest of this incredible and insightful docuseries? Oh, how she's asking how she can view it. Okay, Nina, I think it's all on the same link. Wherever you saw episode 1, you'll see the rest of it. And you'll have to contact GlobeDocs if that doesn't work. Okay, Linda Chen.
And it's also available on Hulu. So if you don't get to it by tonight, you can go to Hulu and see it all.
And stream it on Hulu. Great.
Yes.
Okay, Linda. Thank you for this wonderful, timely work. I live in Philadelphia, and the Chicago neighborhoods and diverse cultural vibrancy and tensions are so much like in Philly, as well as the police and community conflicts. I hope you do a screening and discussion in Philadelphia. Any plans for that?
We'd love it.
Right.
Well, she's getting at a point which was very important to us in the making of the series, which is, and it was interesting. We think of Chicago, you know, it's been called the quintessential American city because it's not on either coast. It's in the heartland, but it has so much of the diversity and vibrancy and complexity of any big city in America, right? So we always thought of this as, yes, there's something that makes Chicago unique, and that's worth capturing, of course. But it's also, it also has so much to say to people wherever you live. And it was interesting when we first were out trying to sell it before the pandemic kind of impacted sales in a, in a big way. Some of the early responses back were, we love it, but it's too regional. We fear it's too regional. And it's like, we were like, you got to be kidding me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now, given George Floyd and everything, anybody watching this series now will get that, like, Chicago's problems are America's problems. Mm-hmm. And there's much to be gleaned wherever you live from this story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach. Do you have something to add to that as a producer? Because that comes across in a beautifully subtle way.
Yeah, I mean,
universal.
I would just add that, I mean, I hope that in the same way, Chicago has reputations, good and bad, all over. But I hope that, with the series and the depiction of the city, that, it sort of challenges some of what people may think about the city. And maybe that rolls into a different way of looking at their own city, or at other people, or thinking they know things, but they actually don't. The same way we're saying we're naive about, barber shops or people's responses, that, people, it's so easy to jump to think a conclusion and think, when the reality is you haven't taken the time to listen or learn, and you need to just, pump the brakes a little bit and open your ears.
And your eyes. He's
and your eyes.
Guy, so
I'm always worried about the sound, right? You see, got a headphone in still too, right?
Yeah, well, Sarah asks, thank you for the film. I was amazed that over 5 hours kept me so engaged. What happened to the indicted alderman?
Oh, he's still an alderman.
He's still an alderman. He's still serving, and he's got a team of lawyers.
Yes.
So he's going to be there a while. I think he is more, I think Zach will have his own opinion on this, but I think he's more likely to not win as an alderman than to go to prison, because his power has been circumscribed considerably because of the indictment, because of Lori Lightfoot. Mm-hmm. And so I think he's more vulnerable to lose re-election at this point than he is to go to prison.
Yeah, and we didn't cover it in the series, but there was an alderman who didn't run for re-election in 2019, who actually had been wearing a wire for the FBI for, I think it was something like 18 months, maybe 2 years. Yeah. And he worked closely with Alderman Burke. And so, the fallout, I don't know that all of those details have been made public, and it's been a while now, so who knows if they ever will be, but I'm sure there's a lot of interesting things on there that, have yet to be reported.
Yeah. I'm glad someone asked that as a follow-up to things that were in the film, because I also wanted to ask you about the Lincoln Yards project that was so important to the film and what was happening with the hideout bar. I'm curious about that. Any development? What the developments were with that?
Well, it's moving forward. Mm-hmm. Right before Rahm left office, he pushed through a vote with the city council. I think literally days before.
It reminds me of the Supreme Court vote in the Senate.
Yeah.
It's like the last minute, possible.
He pushed it through. And it's since come out that there was some funny business with the way in which that neighborhood was, ruled to be a depressed area, or I forget what the exact term is, but that allows for that kind of expenditure. And that if the vote hadn't happened when it happened, it probably would not have happened.
Right.
He pushed it through. And Lori Lightfoot is having to deal with that because she didn't fight it. Even though she wasn't in office, she didn't technically have the power, but she kind of, so there's a lot of pushback on her now. Like, what is she going to do about it? And how is she going to make it more equitable? But it's moving forward.
Yeah. And that's roughly $1 billion of taxpayer money being used in an area that's not economically depressed. Meanwhile, as you see in the series, the South and West Sides have been, largely forgotten economically and otherwise for generations now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to me. There's that moment. It's, it's kind of subtle, I think, but we like subtlety. Where we're at that city council meeting where they're deciding to build the police academy, right? And Rahm Emanuel says in the city council meeting, he says, we've just opened a new African-American restaurant on the West Side, the first one in like 2 decades or something. And he's saying that as if he's proud of that.
Yes.
Like that's somehow a major accomplishment. Out, granted, great, glad the restaurant got open, but my God, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Not really making his point.
No.
Many subtle comments. Yeah. I want to ask a little bit about when you said, I think, Zach, you said it, but for both of you, when you were shooting and you had no deal, you were shooting this all on your own and hoping to find a buyer. How did that come about? And was there any trepidation among anyone that it was a major series? And I guess at that point you didn't know how long it would be, but you knew that this wasn't just going to be a 2 or 3 hour film.
Yeah, Participant Media was our partner. They, thank God, they both this series and America to Me, they funded both these series, and they funded it without having a partner in place, a broadcast partner or distributor in place. And that's because they really believed in what we were doing. And thank goodness it's worked out on both of those, that we got buyers. And so maybe they'll work with us again at Participant. I don't know. But I think it's fair to say that neither America to Me nor this series may have happened at all if not Participant hadn't that's my dog, hadn't really gone for this and made the commitment that they made.
Without any conversation or reluctance about the length of it.
Well, it's interesting. So on America to Me, the original contract said 4 to 6 hours.
Okay.
And Diane Wireman, who is, you know, our amazing person there at Participant that we deal with regularly. I said to her, I said, this is going to be longer than 4 hours. She goes, I know. But no one anticipated 10. And they went with it. And on this one, it started out to be a film, a standalone film. But then we had Diane come to town and look at like a 6 hour version or something. I don't know.
Over 2 days, I think, didn't we?
Yeah. And Diane is really smart about all this stuff. And she said, I get it. It's got to be a docuseries. Now, here's the thing that's really exciting about what's going on in our world now, right? Which is, you know, docuseries are kind of all the rage. A lot of times they're about crime and cults and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I get the appeal of those. So it's not to diminish the risk of doing something like this in a docuseries, but we are in a situation where buyers like docuseries. My dog. They like docuseries because a docuseries, they get more bang for their buck. You know, and if you're very affordable filmmakers like Zach and me, you know, then it's a good deal for everybody.
Yeah. You know, and I would just add too about the length question. This, from the cut, you know, the series premiere, the first 2 hours, but it was a 4 episode series at that point, premiered at Sundance. And the anticipation was always, when we find a broadcast partner, that we'll have to edit down the episode lengths. But with Nat Geo, we didn't have to do any editing. I mean, it was pretty astonishing that the first 4 hours, even though they were different lengths between like 59 minutes and change to an hour, 8 minutes, they just took them exactly as they were and found a way to deal with them on their station, which I thought was, you know, pretty amazing.
Yeah, Nat Geo really got the series, and they got it both as a portrait of the city and a portrait of America. I mean, they came up with this tagline, which we love, portrait of a city, story of a nation. And that sums it up, and they got that, and that's why they became our partners, and they've been great partners.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you did at least get to premiere at Sundance, and kind of right before everything changed.
Yeah.
Just what was that like? And that must have really given you a boost, because the word right away was that at least audiences seem to really like it and critics seem to really like it.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's nothing like seeing it with an audience. And, you know, this is a docuseries, but we think of it as just one long film. You know, one very long film. And because that's the way we make these things. And yes, we find ways at the end of episodes to hopefully end on a provocative note or a note to make you think and make you want to keep watching. But, you know, I think that's why someone said they, you know, 5 hours went fast. I think you can literally just watch this as one long film, and audiences at festivals got that chance. In fact, the True False Festival in Missouri, which is a great doc festival,
That's right here. Yeah.
they showed the entire, he's wearing the, yeah, he's they showed the entire 4 hours that existed at that time, a couple of times at the festival, and we got to watch audiences watch the entire thing, which was
awesome.
just, you know, pretty amazing.
That's terrific. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Zach, because I just see a question here from Sydney. Not a question, but love that True False hoodie. My last pre-COVID event.
My last pre-COVID event too, because it happened the weekend before, you know, everything really shut down. It was like the March 6th weekend, I think, or 7th, something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you guys have made so many films together. Is there another one in the works? Is it too soon? Have you talked about your next project?
I don't ever want to work with this guy again. This is it. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. No, we can't talk about it, but we've got a new project that's just now starting to get underway. Once it's safe to shoot, which we're excited about, and it'd be very different from this one. So it'd be a nice change from what we've been doing.
Great. Well, this has been a terrific conversation. I'm so glad to have had this opportunity, and I hope our viewers enjoyed it, because the film is amazing. City So Real. If you missed it, you can catch it on Hulu, and you can still watch it with the link by the end of tonight if you didn't see the whole thing. So Zach Piper, Steve James, thank you so much for joining us, and thank all of you for tuning in.
Thank you, Lauren. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, thanks everybody.